Alright, so what oil paint am I using? So I'm going with this Abtalon 502 engine grease. And so I actually have some leftover from when I was working. This is what it looks like when you thin it down to a wash. And now when you shake this up, you can see it's kind of a sepia tone. And I have this actually really, really thin. So it's not quite a filter, but it's more thin than a wash. So it's not going to behave sort of like a traditional oil wash if you've seen some other creators. So what I wanted was the tinting effect of a filter, but I still wanted to get some shadow around things like rivets and so forth. So this consistency works great for me. Um, for other people, oils are just so flexible. You don't have to use them that way. You can make this a little bit thicker, and it'll behave sort of like the traditional oil wash that people are kind of used to. You could go even thinner, lose the wash properties altogether, and just have a filter. And all you need to do to kind of play around with that is some mineral spirits. So this giant container I got from an art supply store. Where you get your mineral spirits from doesn't really matter. This happens to be odorless because my fiance, normal mineral spirits will kind of give her a headache. So I can use this, around her. She'll be totally fine. Unless you're spraying it. If you do end up spraying this through an airbrush, because you do need this to clean up oil paint and enamel paint, by the way. If you spray this through your airbrush, make sure you're wearing some sort of respiratory protection. It is dangerous to inhale this. You definitely do not want to huff paint thinner. Alright, so we're going to get started, and we're going to go ahead and mix up some wash. And so this just comes in a little tube. One thing I do want to note, you'll notice I have cardboard, and then I have kitchen towel on top of this. You want to protect your work surface. If you're renting, you don't want an angry landlord. If you own your own home, you don't want an angry wife or spouse. Make sure you protect your work surface. But all we're going to do is squeeze a little bit of this out into the bottom of my glass container. And now these little glass containers, I believe I got these from just like a home supply store. So maybe it was At Home. My fiance loves that store. I don't know if they have those across the pond in the UK, but they're pretty prevalent here in the US. And when you're putting your oil paint away, guys, make sure you clean it, because these little squeeze bottles can get kind of messy. Put that cap on right away so it doesn't leak anywhere. There is linseed oil in there, so if it's warm where you're using it, that oil will start moving. So seal that up really quick. And now I already have my recipe in my head. I use 5 pipettes of thinner to go ahead and mix up my pseudo wash, I'll call it. I haven't really thought of what I would call something between a filter and a wash, but for now, pseudo wash will do. And same thing with this. You don't want to spill this anywhere. Go ahead and put the cap on, and let's get this guy out of the way. And now we're just gonna mix this up. Now, if I had a bigger one of these, I would just use an mechanical paint stirrer. I'm kind of scared to use it in this flanged cup because I don't know if it'll splash everywhere, so I'll just go ahead and mix this up by brush. It is nice to have two of these while you're working, so you see I have an empty one here. So you can keep your wash in one, and you can keep neat thinner in the other one, and use that to clean your brushes when you're done. But you just want to get this really mixed. You'll kind of want to move it around so you can see the bottom of the cup. Make sure you're breaking up all of the clumps of pigment. And so you can kind of see what I'm going for here is when I touch this to the side of the container, all of the paint just runs, all of the pigment rather, runs back down into the bottom of the cup, and there's just a slight hint of color that lingers on the side of the glass. And that's the consistency that I like working with my oil washes for this project. So, other thing, trusty little latex glove. This stuff will run everywhere, and it will get into your skin. It is very messy, so you want to have adequate protection. So I'm going to go ahead and take this old mix that I had and put that in there. And so these little jars are great for saving oil or enamel mixes because typically you don't want to put this, well, you know, for these tubes, I couldn't put my leftover paint back in there. And then for anything that comes in a bottle, you might not want to mix, you know, your mixed paint and contaminate everything else. So these little jars are great for saving your leftover paint so that you don't waste anything. So now to actually apply this, I've got a medium-sized makeup brush. Any cheap makeup brush will really do, doesn't matter. And we just go into the pot, get the excess off, and we just slather this all over the place. And don't worry about it pulling right now, we'll handle the pulling later. We'll kind of let gravity do its thing, and then we'll come in and assist later on where necessary. The nice thing about this is you have a super long working time. So if you've never used oils or enamels before, if you're used to acrylics like most wargamers, you know, acrylics will dry on you in a matter of seconds, and then you can't go back in and fix your mistakes. With oils, these things don't dry for like a whole 24 hours. Or correction, they will begin drying. They might be dried to the touch, but you can reactivate the paint with just a little bit of thinner on a brush, and then you can go and, you know, remove it if you need to. You can move pigment around. You can, you know, streak it and add all kinds of effects. You can stipple it. You know, whatever you want to do, you've got all the time in the world to make it happen. And then once you're done, you just gotta let it completely dry before you move on. And so we got that side nice and covered, and now we're gonna flip it and do the other side. And as you can see, it's dripping all over the place, which again, that is why we protect our working space. Another thing to mention, we are technically using toxic thinning material. So you know, if you're a brush slicker, which is a bad habit anyway. You definitely don't want to lick your brushes with this stuff. You'll end up needing a trip to the hospital, which is no fun. So stop licking your brushes, definitely don't do this. And we are just getting this everywhere. You can kind of see with the capillary action, it's going into all of the crevices and it's running down. But on those flat surfaces, it's still kind of tinting the color a little bit with a nice little sepia tone, which is awesome. It blends together all of the dry brushing highlights and all the weathering that we did. Just looks awesome. So now we're gonna let gravity do its thing. We're just gonna sit this here in the back while we start working on the next piece.